Coming in this evening, a clash between Indian and Chinese troops that's been reported now in the Yangtze area near Tawang in Arunachal Pradesh. The incident took place on the 9th of December, and sources now saying more than 300 PLA soldiers attempted to get into Tawang area where they wanted to uproot an Indian post. The government of India says that the bid was successfully thwarted by Indian sides, but there has been reports of injuries on both sides. According to an official press release, the PLA troops contacted the LAC in Tawang sector. It was contested by Indian troops in a firm and resolute manner. The face-off has led to minor injuries to a few personnel from both sides. The army says both sides then immediately disengaged from the area. Our commander in the area held a flag meeting with his counterpart to discuss the issue, is what the army says. In certain areas along the line of actual control in the Tawang sector in Arunachal Pradesh, there have been over the years areas of differing perception. Both sides patrol the area up to their claim lines. This has been the trend since 2006. So there is, of course, plenty of concern over exactly the details. Remember, this comes 2.5 years after the more violent incident that took place in Galwan in Ladakh, and amidst reports of de-escalation there, this further escalates the political temperature and certainly the military temperature. I'm joined by Shiv Arora, Senior Executive Editor who tracks defense for us. Abhishek Bhalla, our Bureau Chief, also does so. So I want to ask you two, both, what do you think happened, Shiv? What exactly are the details you're picking up? How did this happen?
Rajdeep, my sources tell me that in the Yangtze sector of Tawang, temperatures have been elevated for quite a few months now. This is as a result of elevated Chinese activity in terms of bolstering the number of troops at each of those posts, which are kind of few and far between in that particular area. But there do exist protocols about not increasing the number of troops at either post on each side. But the Indian side has been observing a marked increase in the number of posts in the Yangtze sector, sometimes by a factor of 2 or 3. So 300 to 400 more troops than the actual agreed number. Now, this particular incident on the morning of December the 9th happened when one particular patrol from one of those posts that had caused a little bit of a problem between the two sides came towards the Indian side in numbers larger than a usual patrol is supposed to venture out on these missions, Rajdeep. And when they were challenged by the Indian side, where things were already a little ill-tempered because they had already been speaking, there had already been a local commander level talk between the two sides about those increasing numbers, and so tempers were already high. And then either a stone was thrown or somebody flew off the handle and threw a punch, which is not uncommon when things get heated, when patrols run into each other, and things just sort of deteriorated from there. It became a bit of a brawl. I understand that it lasted about 12 to 13 minutes, no longer than that, Rajdeep. There were 3 or 4 different groups of men who were fighting for about 12 to 13 minutes, but then there was a very quick disengagement, as in the old times when patrols have brawled in this manner. So there was a quick disengagement, minor injuries, some fractures, some black eyes, bruises on both sides, but local commanders have met just a few hours after that on the same day to try and keep the peace.
Abhishek, this incident happened on the 9th of December? We are today on the 12th, so it's been kept under wraps till this evening. What are your defense sources telling you?
Well, on the 9th of December, there was a patrol of about 15 to 20 Chinese soldiers that was intercepted by the Indian side. And as is usual in such face-offs, it started with the usual pushing and shoving, dhakka mukki, and then there was some stone pelting from the periphery. That's what escalated matters. Tempers rose, and things really got out of hand. There was additional deployment from both the sides when this pushing and shoving started. And of late, the Chinese had gathered about 300 soldiers in the vicinity, which is an extremely high number. It's almost half a battalion. And, a battalion consists of about 800 soldiers. So to have 300 amassed at one particular area, there was a sense on the Indian side that something is amiss. And that's the reason why they were able to intercept them well in time. But things could have really gotten worse had there not been a quick disengagement.
Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs Editor, is also joining us shortly. But is it unusual, Shiv, to have seen what has happened, given the fact, as you say, that there are areas along the LAC that are hotly contested, especially in this area, but this kind of direct, almost conflict between the two sides, call it a clash, unusual? How do you sort of place it, particularly in the context of what happened 2.5 years ago in Galwan?
Rajdeep, most definitely unusual, but not something that hasn't happened before, even in this particular sector, which is Yangtze. In fact, just a few months ago, a little over a year ago, in October 2021, there was a confrontation between both sides. No injuries of any kind, but the Indian side had actually kept some of those Chinese troops back, as an aggressive measure because they had ventured too deep inside the Indian side. Now, the Indian government, the Indian MOD constantly talks about differing perceptions, their perception versus your perception leading to this kind of thing. But the truth of the matter, which should be uncomfortable to most, is that the Border Tranquility Protocol was written specifically to address these perceptions and how to manage elevated, tempers during patrols colliding with each other. But in the shadow of Galwan, Rajdeep, which you rightly pointed out, which was a terrible, very violent clash where all manner of protocols were violated, including the use of weapons, including the lack of communication, etc. Any patrol brawl of this kind runs the risk of escalating into a bigger incident. Now, this particular incident is not comparable to Galwan because Galwan had mass casualties on both sides. But the point you make about the information coming out a few days later, and an official statement talking about just minor injuries happening, once again brings up those questions about whether we will know precisely what happened. But I've just spoken to someone from Arunachal Pradesh in Tawang, where I've traveled to quite a few times in the past, and they say that incidents like these have happened before. More disturbingly, given Chinese activity in many of those posts in that area, it's pretty likely that situations could arise where something like this happens again, Rajdeep.
Let's get in more voices at this point to try and understand what this really means. Brahma Chelani, strategic affairs expert, someone who's tracked China for years, joins me. Lieutenant General Sanjay Meston, defense expert. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, joining me, former Chief of the Staff, 14 Corps. And Major General G.G. Dwivedi, defense expert, joins me. K.C. Singh, also former diplomat with us. So we've got lots of voices coming in, and I want to get each of you to respond to what you've just heard from Shiv and Abhishek. Brahma Chelani, you first. Are you surprised by what's happened, given the fact that just a few weeks ago, we had Prime Minister Modi have a face-to-face at the G20 with the Chinese Premier? Are you surprised at all that just a few weeks later, we've seen what we have in Arunachal? Or are you going to de-link the two?
As the Pentagon said recently, that the Chinese strategy is to downplay the strategy of military with India. So, and that actually is what China is pursuing. It's pursuing aggression with engagement. It's seeking political normalcy with India. Its trade with India is surging to the extent that its trade surplus with India has overtaken India's total defense spending. So from the Chinese side, they're having the cake and eating it too, while continuing with the aggression for the last 1 month. And actually, it also suits the Indian government because the Indian government has not acknowledged the loss of territories in Ladakh, and therefore de-emphasizing the Chinese aggression actually works to the benefit of both sides. But clashes have to be seen in the larger light because these clashes have been recurrent. These clashes began on May 1st, 2020, when India first discovered the Chinese encroachments in Ladakh. Since then, there have been periodic opposing forces in Ladakh, in Uttarakhand, on the Sikkim-Tibet border, and on the Tawang-Tibet border. So these clashes have been happening periodically. Unfortunately, the Indian media tends to focus only on the Galwan Valley clashes, disregarding the other clashes that have been happening for the last 31 months. So these clashes are not uncommon, but they underscore the dangers of escalation, because any particular clash can get out of hand. And when rival forces are increasing in strength, and the enemies are still engaged in frenzied buildup of both forces and border infrastructure, the dangers of escalation of accidental conflict are real.
So you're actually saying there have been 31 clashes, you claim, since May of 2020. General Kulkarni, you want to respond to that? Are we seeing a situation where the real danger is any of these clashes? In this instance, the disengagement seems to have happened in reasonably quick time. But is there a fear that any of these clashes could go out of control? Do you see any pattern if there have been 31 clashes, as Professor Chelani claimed, since May of 2020?
Rajdeep, thank you very much. First and foremost, this kind of a patrolling activity by the Chinese, at least I have witnessed it in the place where you're all referring to as Yangtze. I've seen it happening in 1999, just when the Kargil war was on. And it not just lasted, it lasted almost, I think, nearly 60 days. And then we had to hold a flag meeting at Bumla. I was the commanding officer, so I know exactly what happened there. Subsequently, later also in 2006, as a brigade commander there, I know this is a kind of patrolling activity which the Chinese indulge in. And there is always been a perception there, because this is their claimed grazing ground. They keep saying that again and again. And we have a stone wall created. They always want to step out of the stone walls. And that's where the pushing arises, that look, don't cross these stone walls. This is where it is. And invariably, they do sometimes come in strength. Sometimes they don't come in strength. We see it exactly because we're all in dominating heights. We know exactly there's a road down below. So we watch what's going on. They all come up, and that's the time. It's question, the Chinese have been doing it. Chinese will continue to do it. They intend building a pressure on India as much as whichever way they can. And at least I have seen it, as I told you, from 1999. And it's a regular feature because of the perception of the LAC. And to say that it has happened just now, yes, just because it has happened after Galwan. And obviously, when I'm referring to 1999, the agreements have been signed 93, 96. And immediately after that, you find that happening. You find Xi Jinping taking over in 2012. You find after 2013, continuous rapid incidents of these kinds. Yes, Chinese can't be trusted. Chinese are building pressure. You see the kind of infrastructure activities that the Chinese have built up. You see the kind of build-up that has taken place. You see all the infrastructure that has come up over there. All kinds of things that I have not witnessed it in the last at least 20 years that I was watching them so closely while I was in the service. But yes, in the last about 3-4 years, tremendous amount of activities are taking place. And that's what we really need to watch out for. We have to be absolutely vigilant. We are vigilant because we are all dominating heights. We know exactly what's happening. And that is the plus point with us. Our troops are there. The Chinese can't surprise us at all. They know it. Yes, after all this, like they've disengaged, there's a flag meeting that takes place at Bumla over there. And then the troops disengage, and that is what happens. But we must not be complicit. We must be vigilant, because Chinese will continue to do what they're doing. There is no denying the fact, and we have to ensure that there's, it must be resolved. Yeah,
you're saying that these have happened in the past, but it's obvious, as you're saying, the intensity has increased, as has the attempt being made to build infrastructure along specific contentious border areas. KC Singh, from a diplomat's perspective, how do you see this playing out at a time when there was a genuine hope of possible de-escalation? There's pressure on President Xi in his own country. Are you surprised by what you've seen?
In fact, it's not surprising at all. In fact, when any dictatorial regime comes under domestic pressure, they will resort to nationalistic steps, or that impulse takes over. That danger was always there. That as
so are you seeing a link between a weakening Chinese leadership and what's happened?
No, it's not weakening. He's taken back his zero COVID policy, which for any autocrat to roll back a policy that he's standing by, with the likely implications, because we are not getting the total number of cases, but the cases will spread and there'll be more deaths in China. So to distract from that, he has to now start off something on the outside. And don't forget, he's just been to Saudi Arabia. There's been an Arab-Chinese high-level summit. So he's come back stronger from that. He's secured the energy resources. And look, this may have happened any number of times, but I think timing is important. We are de-escalating after Galwan. We were supposed to have military-to-military talks, which the Chinese have been postponing. So that was a danger signal. Now in China, if you remember at the last G20 meeting in Indonesia, our prime minister didn't sit down for a meeting with Xi Jinping. They just shook hands. And also remember another thing, that 62 came when the rest of the world, when the Americans and the Soviets were distracted by the Cuban Missile Crisis, now the rest of the world is distracted by what's happening in Ukraine. So the Chinese will always choose these moments. And also the G20 leadership has passed to us. So just when they see that the Indian level is rising at the diplomatic stage, at the international stage, which, for instance, pre-62, Nehru was at a peak. So you try deflating a leadership, you try distracting a leadership. So this should have been expected. And I don't think this is the end of it. There may be more of it unless they are deterred. And the Indian government also must claim on Depsang Plains. Has there been withdrawal by the Chinese? Has there not been a withdrawal? Because if they feel that they can get away with it, they'll try getting away with more of it. Slimy slicing has been their standard approach.
Let me stop you for a moment because you're giving us very interesting points as to the timing of this. I'm coming to you, General Meston and General Dwivedi, in a moment because news just coming in as the Congress party, remember, Parliament is on and the Congress party has decided to target the centre over this China clash when Randeep Singh Surjewala, the Congress MP, saying, when will Modi now show Lal Aankh to China? The Congress says it will raise the India-China clash in Arunachal in Parliament on Tuesday. Listen in to Randeep Surjewala.
Now they are occupying area or attempting to occupy area in Tawang here, Arunachal Pradesh. And an unconfirmed report, which probably you do not know, is now saying that China has now occupied our territory in the Doklam area. Where is the Prime Minister? When will Prime Minister show red eyes to China? Well, will Prime Minister give a befitting reply to China? They can't brazenly occupy our territory.
You know, General Meston, the political rhetoric may be stepped up, especially as Parliament is on, but should the government of India now come out of what some believe is denial mode after Galwan and tell us exactly where we stand vis-a-vis China? Do you believe that the government has been economical with the truth? We don't know exactly, particularly in areas like Depsang, what is the nature of Chinese involvement?
Rajdeep, I personally feel that is not the correct statement. In fact, what Rajdeep Sardesai has just stated, that they have occupied some territories. I totally disagree. No inch of land
Randeep Surjewala, yes,
with Chinese territory at all. I am very, very clear there because I was myself in the Military Operations Directorate handling the China issues, and I've commanded my brigade there, and very intricately we have been on the Chinese border. So let us understand the Chinese strategy. Their Chinese strategy is very, very clear. They want to keep the border issue alive. They simply don't want to resolve it, whereas India wants to resolve the border issue once and for all. And therefore, these perception differences on the line of actual control are what the problem arises. And this has been going on since 90s. You know, the areas of dispute and differences, we have about 19 areas of dispute itself. And therefore, both sides, everyone is aware we are patrolling and they also come. And sometimes when both the patrols are standing together, obviously it is a face-off. And sometimes situation goes out of control. In 2007, the brigade which I commanded in Nathula, where the Doklam Plateau is also there. Of course, I commenced my command in 2009. But in 2007, the Chinese early morning with one major general and about 100 soldiers, they came in some trucks and demolished some of our forward bunkers because they felt that they were on the incorrect side of the LAC. So what I'm trying to say that these kind of occurrences have happened in the past. There's nothing new. But yes, now what is happening, frequency, I would not comment anything on frequency because that has been going on. But the intensity in terms of the number of troops, you know, getting 300 troops, that means there was a directive given by the Chinese government that they have to flare up this issue, have some contact there so that there is reaction, it becomes internationalized, and their attention is diverted from the zero COVID policy or whatever it is, they have their problems. So they have been successful because in all these face-offs, even when I was commanding my brigade in Nathula, the strength was fairly less and we used to just handle it. And that is why weapons have never been fired. Even in Galwan, no troops have used weapon and they have come with the barbed wire, etc. and, you know, sticks, etc. So those are not the way a soldier
So you're saying the intensity is what is the difference at the moment, perhaps. General Dwivedi, you agree with that? That what is changing is that while clashes have taken place of this kind, it's the intensity and the preparedness seemingly of the Chinese to escalate matters.
Well, Rajdeep, I'll take 2-3 minutes to put the issues in perspective, because having served as defense attaché in China and commanded my 3 times on the Chinese border, so I'll give you very detail and also on the ground perspectives. So first and foremost, when we look at China, we need to look at in entirety. Unfortunately, we look at China from one event to another event and do not join the dots of the larger picture. I take you back to 2012, when Xi Jinping took over. There was a sudden, aggressiveness in the PLA and military. We had 2013. Depsan took place. That was just before Li Keqiang Prime Minister visit in April 2013. Come to 2014. Xi Jinping is in Ahmedabad and we are having clashes in Chuma. Then 27, Doklam. And 2020, of course, they crossed all the limits, and 3 divisions, 4 division, 6 division, and the border division, they all came in Eastern Ladakh, where I happened to command my battalion after Siachen. So when you join the dots, very important is what Chinese state. Chinese are constantly stating that Arunachal Pradesh belongs to them, and they want to come to 1959 line, which they are almost there in Ladakh. 2 very important things took place in Tibet. Xi Jinping visited Lhasa in July 21, and they incorporated 2 laws, National Defense Law, which gives PLA tremendous amount of power, and Border Defense Law, with which they changed the names of the places in Tibet and also on Indian side, and they are trying to demarcate the border. Now coming to 2020 and beyond, you see, Chinese have been able to change the status quo of the LAC in Eastern Ladakh. Today, we are having the no more patrolling points, and that was what was decided in 2013. How to patrol, what is the modality of patrolling. Today we have buffer zones, and I was talking to Fobrang Sarpanch, where I commanded my battalion. He says that today we are having these buffer zones, and they cannot graze their cattle. Same thing in Depsan. They haven't gone back. They are sitting on the Y junction, and they are almost breathing on DBO. My point is that we need to see the situation on the ground. I don't talk about politics, but I definitely look at China.
So you're saying that Chinese are very firmly on in many of the spaces. Rather than disengage, they've been trying in a way to try and establish their presence. Arunachal remains a contentious issue, Brahmachalani. As we've seen, the Chinese have never given up their claims to Arunachal in particular. And therefore, this clash, even if you say it's part of a series of clashes, acquires an added importance. Also given, as KC Singh and others are suggesting, perhaps Xi Jinping's own position in his country.
I think it's a Chinese strategy to mount pressure on India from multiple fronts. So the pressure on the Ladakh sector was never intended to be just confined to one sector. That's the reason why there was these periodic clashes on the Sikkim-Tibet border. That's the reason why the Arunachal-Tibet border remains a hot border. I think we need to look at the...
No, but is Arunachal very different? If I may stop you, is Arunachal very different, Professor Chelani, from Ladakh in terms of Chinese intentions there?
Well, if they can succeed in Eastern Ladakh, and they have succeeded in actually changing the line of actual control in Eastern Ladakh in a significant manner to our military disadvantage. If they solidify the territorial changes in Eastern Ladakh, their next target would be Arunachal Pradesh. Make no mistake on that. So we have to be very firm in terms of understanding and countering the Chinese strategy. And I think the worst thing they're doing is letting the Chinese have their cake and eat it too. We've allowed the Chinese to continue to search their feet surplus with India to the extent that it has crossed India's total defense budget. In other words, we are underwriting China's aggression. Last financial year, the Chinese trade surplus with India crossed $70 billion. And this year it's on target to cross $88 billion. We cannot sever trade ties with China, but the least we can do is to start cutting non-essential imports from China. We are inflicting no pain, economic or diplomatic, on China. So we are allowing China to continue with its aggression while reaping growing trade.
So
India.
you're saying
needs to change.
You're saying that we haven't imposed sufficient economic costs on China for the kind of aggression. Now, Dr. S. Jaishankar, I'll come back to our panel, but Dr. S. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister, was at the Aaj Tak Agenda Summit just a couple of days ago. Remember, Dr. Jaishankar has also served in China as India's ambassador there. What did Dr. Jaishankar have to say about the Chinese moves in the area? Listening to Dr. Jaishankar, we'll come back with more.
पर चीन को अगर हम देखें, क्या वो आज हमारी ताकत समझ रहा है? क्या हम बराबरी पर बातचीत कर रहे हैं? क्योंकि बहुत मुश्किल समय निकला है कोविड से लेकर उसके बाद गलवान का समय, जो कि अभी भी गतिरोध है।
देखिए, किसी भी जब ऐसी चुनौतियां आती हैं जैसे चीन के साथ हुई 2020 में, बात करना तो बात की बात है। अगर आपको माने उसी स्तर पे उनके साथ कुछ भी बात करें या मैं कहूँगा आपका जो मैसेजिंग भी है, सबसे पहले आपको ग्राउंड में कुछ करना होगा। और सबसे बड़ी बात मुझे लगा कि उस समय कि हमने फ़ौज को जो है कोविड के बावजूद, क्योंकि आप याद रखिए ये मई जून में हुआ था, उस समय लॉकडाउन, देश में लॉकडाउन भी था। कोविड के बावजूद जो है हम लोग जो हैं फ़ौज को इतनी भारी मात्रा में, इतनी कठिन बॉर्डर में, जहां आप जानते हैं कि 10,000 फुट से 20,000 फुट तक, और जहां इतनी ठंड भी है, जहां लॉजिस्टिक्स, वहाँ के इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर भी बहुत कमज़ोर है, कि हम पूरे आर्मी को डिप्लॉय कर पाए। तो जो डिप्लोमेसी जो है, एक किस्म से जब तक अगर ग्राउंड सिचुएशन आपके पक्ष में जाए तो आपकी डिप्लोमेसी और मजबूत होती। तो उसके बाद जो भी उनके साथ जो बातचीत जो हो रही है, और उसके कुछ परिणाम निकले हैं, पूरे नहीं निकले, अभी भी बातचीत जारी है। इसीलिए निकले हैं क्योंकि हमारी डिप्लॉयमेंट हुई है, और हमारी डिप्लॉयमेंट हुई है, हमारे जवान खड़े हैं, और माने उनका जो ताकत, जो साहस जो उन्होंने दिखाया है, उसकी हमें प्रशंसा करनी चाहिए, क्योंकि हमारी डिप्लोमेसी जो है उनके योगदान से चलती।
We have aggressively deployed our soldiers on the ground, is what the External Affairs Minister claims. General Kulkarni, do you agree with that, that both in Galwan and in Arunachal Pradesh, India has responded as the Defense Minister's statement also claims today, in a sufficiently aggressive manner? Because what seems to be happening is the Chinese are not being deterred. As Brahmachalani pointed out, the Chinese are having their cake and eating it too. They continue to have strong economic relations with India while also pursuing these provocative acts.
See, Rajdeep, all of it has an historical baggage. Let's not get involved into the historical baggage. Despite what it is right from 1950 to what is going on today, there is no denying the fact that China realizes, and the Indian troops are deployed, fully acclimatized, are able to withstand. The Chinese have just to come forward and they go back again to their areas and infrastructure, which is quite comfortable for them. The Chinese PLA troops cannot withstand it. They're aware of it. And there is no reason behind. Until and unless we deter, and now today we are able to deter, because the deterrence is what leads to better diplomacy. There is no denying what the foreign minister is saying. Absolutely. And that is where we have an edge. And that edge
But where is the deterrent showing on the ground? If there have been these 31 clashes from May 2020, clearly the Chinese are not deterred.
See, Rajdeep, these aren't clashes. Let's again say these aren't clashes. These are things trying to, because of the perception of the LAC, they seem to feel that this is the perception of their LAC. We seem to be saying just because we happen to be over there and they come from the rear areas to patrol their area, that's where the face-off takes place. Earlier, all kinds of this thing. But subsequently, what happens is very, very important that now, even for the case in Yangtze, 300 troops of the PLA is definitely a sizable number to have come. And even if they have come, the very fact that even if there have been fights, I'll say boxing bouts between the two of them over there, and even if 6 to 7 of the Indian soldiers have been hurt, and even about 9 to 10 of the Chinese soldiers, the PLA troops have also been, hurt. It's okay. It's perfectly fine. But what does that show? That look, you try and do and cross the red line. I'm not going to leave you. This itself is adequate deterrence at this point of time.
So you're saying
this has been happening.
You're saying we've sent a strong message, but KC Singh, do you believe that we need to do more, or do you believe that the message both in Galwan, now in Arunachal, has been sufficiently strong that we have repelled, according to sources, these attacks?
Look, there are 3 points. One is that, yes, there were competing perceptions of the line of actual control. But what used to happen is we will patrol up to a perception and they would patrol up to theirs. Now, what they've done is by intruding up to their perception, now when they go back, they only create a demilitarized zone, a buffer zone, which denies us patrolling. Now, in Dapsang Plains, they haven't even done that. So now they've shifted to the eastern sector. Eastern sector, Tawang, is very important for them. It's where Dalai Lamas have been born. It's something which has always troubled them. So that monastery is of extreme importance. It keeps Tibetan sense of nationhood alive. So therefore, there would be pressure there. Now, this game will go on. But I agree with Mr. Brahmchalani that where are you deterring? The deterrence has to be not just military. It must also be economic. It must also be denying them the market, because that is what they want in the current global situation where there's an economic slowdown. Then that is the punishment which we need to inflict. Unless that punishment is there, simply military deterrence, they'll always be one.
But that's easier said than done. But that's easier said than done. Given the kind of trade relationship we have with the Chinese, that's easier said than done, Mr. Singh.
No, but that has to be gradual. And that has to be done. Isn't the West doing it to Russia? Isn't Europe suffering today by not buying oil and gas? When you have strategic interests, then you pay a price for it. Are we ready to pay that price?
Can I get in more voices on that? Are we ready to pay that price? Should we go the way of the Russian? General Meston, you want to respond purely again as a military person first. Is there adequate deterrence, you believe, on the ground?
Yes, I would substantiate there is adequate deterrence, and I will prove it how. Number one, all along the LAC, wherever these areas of dispute differences are there, it is not only that the Chinese come in our area, so-called disputed areas, we also take out our patrols in strength, go into their areas, so-called our areas, and we come back. So this has been going on. It is not only that the Chinese do it, we also do it. So that is point one. Point two is, coming on to the deployment. Rajdeep, let me make it very clear that deployment-wise, I would say we have a lot of advantage. Reason being, firstly, all along the line of actual control, Indian Army has got 100% permanent defenses of the bunkers prepared, 100%, all along the LAC. Even in second tier, certain places we have achieved 100%, certain places it is about 70%, 50%, and even in certain places, contingencies. In the depth, third tier, we have got defenses. So again, we have a moral and military edge. Coming on now onto military deployment. In terms of troops, when I was commanding my brigade in Nathula, we had full 1 brigade plus deployed there all along the LAC on the watershed. Chinese side had just barely 2 companies. So all this shows that we have a moral edge, moral ascendancy, and even now coming on to infrastructure development, there have been roads, etc. It's an ongoing process. We are improving it. Not only that, now in Arunachal Pradesh, we are also having, literal road construction. So
no, but the fact is that the Chinese continue. The fact is, General Dwivedi, the Chinese are continuing with construction, despite General Meston, General Kulkarni saying that there is sufficient military deployment. It has not deterred the Chinese. The fact is they carry on with their various infrastructure projects along that contentious area.
Well, Rajdeep, to some extent, you are right. Let me first explain deterrence. Deterrence is a combination of two factors. One is capability and one is intent. I think in both terms, Chinese know that we have the intent to foil their misadventures and we have the capability also. I think if we talk of deterrence, both in terms of capability and intent, that have been shown adequately by the political leadership and by the military leadership. Point number one. Secondly, we need to understand that if see what external affairs minister said, and I like to substantiate that because I have served in that area. You see, when Chinese came in, they were not willing to budge till the round 6 of talks. It's only when we occupied Kailash range, that's the time that they came and then they negotiated and they went back on the Pagong Tso northern bank. The point I'm trying to make is the Chinese only understand strength. And that strength has to be shown. We don't have to only react to Chinese, we have to be also proactive. Point number 3, it is your logistics, your infrastructure. That is very important because how quickly you can take up the field, how quickly you can go to the point of decision. Ironically, today, if you talk of Ladakh, we don't have all-weather connectivity with Ladakh either through Zojila or through Manali. Now, these are the things I think the government is on it, and it will take some time by the time we have the matching capability. But at the moment,
yes, go ahead, finish up. Yes,
yeah, right at the moment, we must ensure tactically we are match for Chinese, and over a period of time, strategically also, we must match them.
Okay, but that, Brahmachalani comes back to where we started, that what according to you is the most effective deterrence? All the military guests on our show are saying we are adequately deployed to rebuff any Chinese incursion. However, it doesn't seem to be deterring the Chinese. What, according to you, is it economic deterrence? Is it push back on the economy that is the way forward? Do you really believe that's possible, given China's relationship with India as a major trade partner?
Steve, let's begin with a basic question. Why was India caught napping in April, May 2020? Why is it that no one has been held accountable for what happened in April and May 2020? We lost key border areas. Not one army commander was held to account. Unless we don't address the basic questions, was it intelligence failure? Was it the failure of the army? Who was responsible for those failures of April, May 2020? We don't have a debate in the
General Kulkarni, want to respond to that? General Kulkarni, Brahmachalani making an important point. Where is the accountability? He's raising the question of accountability. The military keeps saying we are adequately deployed, we are rebuffing. According to Brahmachalani, some accountability should be there. I come back to it. We've still lived in denial post Galwan. The country hasn't been taken into confidence.
See, Rajdeep, what happens, it is not a question. Everybody is accountable. Right from there, the corps commander to the army commander, to the brigade commander, to the company commander, and to the commanding officer. Everybody is accountable. There is no denying the fact. If anybody has faltered, he would have been adequately punished. There is no denying the fact. But the fact still remains, all of it. Let's take the case of Galwan. If somebody insists, why won't we punish? Now, if anybody knows what exactly happened at Galwan, even the CEO who sacrificed his life was there in the meeting before. It was he who went there to see for himself as to where was the tent pitched and why was it there. So I wouldn't want to go into details. But to say that we don't know what is happening or that the Indian troops are not accountable, it isn't so. Everybody is accountable. Everybody knows and everybody is held accountable. As regards what the Chinese are up to, the Chinese are constantly doing. It is not now. It is from 1950. Don't we have a historical baggage? Don't we know which is the Johnson line? Don't we know which is the McCartney line? Don't we know what the 1959 claim line is? Where were they in 1962? Why did they go back? All of it is known. All of it is the historical baggage. To say that, yes, what has happened now is happening just now. It isn't so. It's been happening since past. So we have all on the show have commanded troops right opposite the Chinese. We know
so you're saying,
them.
You're saying this is no different.
Firing at them.
you're saying this is no
Yeah,
different to what has happened in recent past. So let's not create the impression that this is something distinctive. KC Singh, as a final word, do you go along with that? That, we also need to keep, without getting provoked, which is exactly what the Chinese would like, perhaps respond in a much more mature manner without getting overly sort of creating a situation that can go out of control.
Look, Deng Xiaoping's advice from 93 onwards was orderly rise. And that continued. So the Chinese used that period of peace and stability to gain economic and military strength. And having gained it, we've got Xi Jinping now. So it's a different China. It's a China which is now historically feels that all the countries around, they need to dominate the area. And the only rival is US. And that they don't recognize any other power in Asia, which they think should be standing up to them. And the only power that can do that is India. Therefore, strategically, it is inevitable that unless the two countries can sit down and come to terms, but when two countries are rising, normally it's very difficult to come to terms with each other. And that's the lesson of Second World War. So therefore, when is the time when China realizes that it's negative for them, this assertiveness that they have been showing for the last 3-4 years is producing negative results. The Europeans have woken up. Americans have got sanctions on them. And when today the Assistant Secretary of State of US was in China, and the Chinese were saying, why are you treating us like it was during the Cold War? Well, you're asking for it. You are the one who's being aggressive. And therefore, the Americans have realized that in opening up China, which Nixon did, they've created a monster. And that monster is now challenging American hegemony. So therefore, we are in a very difficult situation. And we have to realize that if there is domestic difficulty, which I see a difficult next year for Xi Jinping, both economically and health-wise, because zero COVID, you can't make a transition from zero COVID to normalcy in China. There will be deaths, there will be widespread disease, then there will be a temptation to look for distractions abroad. So it's a difficult period, we have to remain alert, but within the country, the government must take opposition into confidence, must take the nation into confidence. Because the Prime Minister needs the entire nation behind them, not just a mandate here, a mandate there in a state. His mandate is for the whole of India. And he must carry the nation with him. And for that, he needs to. And look, G20 may turn out to be really a negative because the Chinese realized that we would not want to ratchet up the tensions with China because that will spoil the G20 presidency. You don't want two of the prominent members fighting with each other when we are the president. So they realize that in a way we are deterred because we want G20 to be successful. So to that extent, where is it that you draw the line? That your national interests dictate, that you push back wherever that is required, whether G20 is successful or not successful, where Chinese try to sabotage it or don't try to sabotage it. But this is going to be a difficult year, the coming year.
Okay, let me leave it there. Clearly, we are in difficult times and you're dealing with a very difficult neighbor which cannot be trusted. And therefore, what's happened in Arunachal Pradesh in a way is a warning signal of what could lie ahead. I appreciate my guests joining us. More details, of course, will come in the days ahead and hopefully in Parliament tomorrow. Thank you all very much for joining me here on the news today. Let's turn from there to our Get Real India story. Away from what's happened in China, the other big story is just what's happening in Maharashtra, where funds that were allocated for the Nirbhaya fund have allegedly been used, at least some of them, to allow SUVs that were bought through the Nirbhaya fund to then be used for VVIP security. It's typical at times of the way governments are run. VVIP security matters above all else. And ministers in the Eknath Shinde government seem to have got these SUVs which were originally procured for women's safety. Take a look at Get Real India.
These vehicles were procured using money from the Nirbhaya fund and were to be used to ensure security of women. Instead, they are being allegedly used to give Y+ security to MLAs and MPs of the Eknath Shinde Shiv Sena faction in Maharashtra. A clear misuse of funds set up in the wake of the infamous Delhi gang rape and murder in 2012 that set off wide-ranging legal and women's security reforms. Sources say that in June this year, the Mumbai police bought 220 Boleros, 35 Ertiga, 313 Pulsar motorcycles and 200 Activa two-wheelers using the 30 crore rupees corpus that it had received under the Nirbhaya Fund. Mumbai police sources say 47 Boleros were requisitioned for use as escort vehicles for security of MPs and MLAs. The opposition is now targeting the Shinde-led government, alleging wrongful use of these vehicles. While the NCP has written to the DGP seeking withdrawal of vehicles from VIP security duty, the Uddhav Thackeray faction of the Shiv Sena has threatened to launch protest if the vehicles are not deployed for the purpose they were acquired for. The Maharashtra government has rejected the charges levelled by the opposition.
If you feel so insecure and you get a Y+ category security, what about the Aam Janata of Maharashtra, especially the women? The funds that would be used for their safety and security has been misappropriated to safeguard these 47 MLAs. It's a shame, it's absolute shame that today we are absolutely seeing misappropriation and embezzlement of funds.
ये शिंदे फडणवीस जी की सरकार है जहां पे ऐसी कोई बातें महिलाओं के सुरक्षा से कोई कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं होगा। ये सारी की सारी गाड़ियां 8 दिन के अंदर अंदर प्रक्रिया शुरू हो चुकी है। आने वाले 8 दिनों में ये जो 99 गाड़ियां थी वो वापस महिला सुरक्षा के लिए अपने अपने जगह पे जाएगी और महिलाओं के सुरक्षा के लिए वहां पे सज्ज रहेगी।
The BJP also claimed that vehicles bought with Nirbhaya funds were used in the escort of Maharashtra Vikas Aghadi ministers Chhagan Bhujbal, Sunil Kedar, Aditi Tatkare, Subhash Desai and NCP MP Supriya Sule. Mumbai police sources say while 17 of the Boleros deployed for security of MLAs and MPs were returned, 30 are still on duty. The Nirbhaya Fund is being given to states by the centre since 2013 to implement schemes related to women's safety. Bureau Report, India Today.
Why do so many MLAs and MPs really need Y-class security? That's what I want you to think about. Remember, that story was broken by Indian Express's Thavir Mohammed first. Let's take a break. On the other side is our Good News Today story. You're watching the news today. News without the noise.
भैया जी हमला। भैया जी 10 गोलियां ले ले।
गोलियां नहीं रज्जा, गोली।
पर बाहर तो 10 लोग हैं।
10 हो या पूरी बस, अब तो बस 1 है तो डन है। इसको कोई वॉच कराओ। जब वॉचो मिले ढेर सारे OTT ऐप्स एक ही प्लान में तो हर कोई बोलेगा वॉचो 1 है तो डन है।
वॉचो प्लान स्टार्टिंग एट जस्ट 42 रुपीज पर मंथ। आज ही सब्सक्राइब करें और पाएं सिलेक्ट प्लान्स पर 1 महीना कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री।
India Today exit poll silences all.
The BJP is set to record history in Gujarat.
Projected total tsunami in Gujarat.
The biggest ever BJP victory in Gujarat.
Only poll calling Congress win in Himachal.
Congress 30 to 40 seats in this election.
Validated, vindicated, victorious. When you are an outlier, it shows. No herd mentality, 100% courage and ability.
Access My India Today group exact poll. Once again.
Strength of conviction proved again.
We have the most accurate pollster with us.
The only pollster picked it absolutely bang on.
The gold standard of getting it right.
Welcome back. Just about enough time to leave you with our good news today story. And it's a story that will help millions of people across the world, because in the world of cancer treatments, a therapy is now being touted as revolutionary. A teenager suffering from an incurable leukemia received the groundbreaking treatment that's being called gene therapy. The patient is now in remission. This new method raises hopes of more effective treatment. Sneha Mordani with tonight's Good News Today story as I leave you. Good night, goodbye, Jai Hind, Namaskar.
I'm feeling happy actually.
Why are you feeling happy today?
Because I have had new cells put into me.
Really?
Yes, wow.
Radiation, surgeries, aggressive chemotherapies. Oncologists can now think of looking beyond these traditional systems of treating cancers. A teenage girl in the UK has recovered from the cancer using gene therapy. Reports suggest all other kinds of treatment for Elisa had failed earlier.
Enough to control the disease. In fact, she'd already had a bone marrow transplant previously, and unfortunately, the disease had still come back. She was running out of treatment options, so we're looking at trying to make a new treatment for her. We've taken immune cells called T cells from a healthy donor, brought them to our laboratory, and we've changed them so they can work against types of leukemia that are otherwise difficult to treat.
Doctors treating Elisa engineered a new type of T cell that was capable of hunting down and killing Elisa's cancerous T cells. Doctors say genetic manipulation is a very fast-moving area of science with enormous potential across a range of diseases. However, accessibility and cost remain areas of concern.
First patient in the world that was treated in London through this novel technology where the lymphocytes have been collected from a donor and the genes have been changed by a novel technology called base editing. And this was infused into the patient who could not go into remission, and the cancer could not be cleared for a long time with chemotherapy. And fortunately, it worked for this patient and the cancer was cleared.
At least for the moment, a positive beginning has been made.
I'm very honoured and it feels good to have helped other people as well.
With Sneha Mordani in New Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
The showdown in Telangana continues as the YSR TP chief, YS Sharmila Jagan's sister, has been hospitalized after her health deteriorated during an indefinite hunger strike. Sharmila was protesting against alleged denial of permission to continue her statewide Padayatra at the party headquarters on Friday. After her health worsened, doctors rushed to the protest site and warned that she was suffering from severe dehydration. The Telangana police then forcefully shifted her to a hospital in the wee hours of Sunday, breaking her indefinite fast. Doctors said on Sunday that Sharmila's health condition had stabilized, but she needed